Thanks, Las Cian Corla. I was born in 1983 in the country of Magdalene Laundries, of the Kerry babies, of Anne Lovett and of many other horrors. It's been said in the debate that the past is another country, and I think that's true in some very important respects, most importantly the attitudes of people to these issues. But in legal terms, that country continues today with the Eighth Amendment, which reflected and which codified that oppression of women which was widespread and is still in our Constitution today. It's still in our Constitution today because we've had a political establishment tied to the Catholic Church, tied to very reactionary forces, hypocritically availing of the existence of an English solution, which was absolutely unwilling to do anything to deal with the reality of abortion in this country. That wasn't just the case in 1983 or throughout the 80s. It was the case throughout the 1990s, it was the case in the 2000s, and it was the case even a few years ago here, when we and others introduced repeal bills and were met by a wall of opposition and told that there was no appetite for change on this issue. What changed? What changed that now there is, very positively, a clear majority in the Dáil for repeal? What changed where the anti-choice voices are now in a relatively small minority in the Dáil, reflected in the fact that only 8 Fianna Fáil members could come to their meeting to save the 8th? The crucial thing is the movement that has taken place. The movement which exploded rightfully in anger at the death of Savita Halappanavar and repeatedly brought tens of thousands onto the streets in protests that doubled in size on a yearly basis. The publicising of the availability of the abortion pills by Rosa and Women on Web illustrated that abortion was not just being exported, but it was happening in Ireland. And with the opening of a discussion in society, because of that movement and because of the horrific cases like that of Savita Halappanavar, public opinion changed extremely rapidly, and young people have led the way on that. For example, the Red C poll illustrates that 79% of 18 to 24-year-olds and 73% of 25 to 34-year-olds support abortion on request up to 12 weeks. 67% in Dublin across all age brackets support, but a majority in every area of the country support in that opinion poll. That shift in public opinion was then reflected in the Citizens' Assembly, and the outcome there, which was entirely unexpected from the point of view of the establishment. And then what we've seen in the last week, thankfully, is a dramatic catch-up by politicians of the change that has taken place outside of this House. It's all those who fought for abortion rights, those who marched, those who publicised the availability of abortion pills, those who proudly displayed the repeal slogan on jumpers, on bags, on badges, who have got us this far. And there's a crucial lesson there in terms of winning the referendum itself. It is those forces that got us this far, and it is those forces that will win the referendum, as opposed to any establishment politicians. These movements have to lead the referendum campaign, to get out there to discuss with people about the reality of the conditions facing women, to win the arguments, to win the referendum, and to win it by as large a margin as is possible. There's been a lot of discussion about the need for a respectful debate, and I agree with the need for a respectful debate. The basis of such a respectful debate, in my opinion, has to be respect for scientific facts. Those forces of the anti-choice campaign, which have their origins in the same forces of religious fundamentalism that fought for and managed to get inserted the Eighth Amendment in the first place, are clearly honing their arguments. They've got focus groups and so on. And the arguments that they're using up to now out there are not arguments based on scientific facts. They're based on deliberate misinformation. I, and I'm sure many other people, have been getting ads on my Facebook feed from Love Both telling me that 5,000 lives a year are saved by the Eighth Amendment and comparing it to other laws which saves lives. It's complete nonsense on every possible level. If it was true in the sense that they mean that it's true, it would mean that there's 5,000 forced pregnancies every year since 1983. That would not be something to celebrate. But it isn't true, even in the sense that they mean it. Ireland's abortion rate is comparable to other countries where abortion is legal. Irish women just have to travel or take illegal but safe abortion pills. And as has been mentioned, the Netherlands, which has pro-choice laws, has one of the lowest abortion rates in the world. And that gets to a very core point here, that abortion is a reality, and you can have legal or illegal abortion, or else you're in favour of forced pregnancies. The second key argument that I think the anti-choice campaign will use was highlighted very well and deconstructed by Fintan O'Toole yesterday in the Irish Times, abusing the issue of Down syndrome with misinformation such as, quote, 90% of babies diagnosed with Down syndrome in Britain are aborted. It's deliberate misinformation because it leaves out the close to 40% of women who choose not to be screened for Down syndrome. Incredibly, because of misinformation raised at the Oireachtas Committee, the Danish ambassador was forced to write this sentence. It should be noted that it is not the policy of the Danish health authorities to eradicate Down syndrome. Of course it's not. But the argument is also utterly hypocritical, because many of these people who want to judge women who make personal decisions have voted for or supported the cuts in services for children with disabilities, which means that children are on waiting lists for years for access to basic services. We should talk about real choice, which means providing for proper public services, including for children with disabilities. I think that that side of the argument presents their arguments in that way because they think that they can work, but also because they know that their fundamental views, the views upon which those are based, are not now widely shared in society. Because at the root of their viewpoint, of those elements like the Ione Institute, the likes of Love Both, etc., is a religious fundamentalist view. You often hear references from that side that religion has nothing to do with it. But the speeches that we've heard in this House against repeal are very revealing. Invariably, they reference God and religion. And I have nothing against, and people have every right to hold religious views. They have every right to structure and organise their lives in line with those religious beliefs. But I don't think that they have a right to impose those views on others, or to have those views reflected in the constitution of our state and then imposed on all. That's linked to the issue of conscience that often comes up on this issue. I have to say I find it a bit frustrating that you have all these TDs, largely men, talking about struggling with their consciences on the issue. You actually don't have to struggle with your conscience on the issue if you're a man. You will never have to make a decision about having an abortion. What it's saying is that your personal opinion, whatever outcome you come to in terms of your conscience, that opinion should have control over other people's bodies. And in my opinion, that's linked to a view, perhaps unconsciously, subconsciously held, of women as lesser or as property. That was summed up quite horrifically in the Fianna Fáil TD quoted in the Sunday Business Post, saying, "What farmer would abort a calf? You'd always give it a chance to live." I mean, it is mind-boggling, and I don't presume that he meant any offence, but it is mind-boggling that anyone would say such a thing, because whoever that is literally comparing a woman to a cow, a human being to your livestock. And I want to say to them that your views are utterly out of touch with what people across age brackets, across geography, and including men, think out there. If you look at the opinion poll, men of all age groups in the Red C poll support the right of women to access abortion on request at least up to 12 weeks. The idea of men telling women what to do or controlling women's bodies is over. In that sense, the movement for repeal here is part of the global movement, including Me Too and Time's Up. I want to, before I finish, just issue a warning to the government. Every day that passes, every day before we repeal the 8th Amendment and legislate for abortion in this country, 10 women are forced to travel to access abortion and 5 women take abortion pills in Ireland. These women can't wait. There is a danger that the government is seeking to revisit and potentially come up with a different conclusion, an issue that was considered extensively by the Oireachtas Committee, and it decided to recommend repeal simpliciter. The government does not need to reinvent the wheel together with the Attorney-General. The Citizens' Assembly, with its proposal, was seeking to direct the Dáil to act to ensure that abortion rights were actually delivered and to immunise any abortion legislation from potential challenge. It had little time to debate the legal options, and the advice it received wasn't fully rounded. The Oireachtas Committee, on the other hand, weighed and heard testimony from 3 legal experts and had its own legal adviser who outlined 6 possible options. Eventually, the committee decided that legal certainty is not guaranteed with any option, but that the potential for a legal challenge post-repeal on the basis of implied rights of the unborn was outweighed by the fact that the people would have spoken quite clearly in the course of the referendum, and that the dangers of inserting such a clause outweigh the benefit. The dangers are that abortion legislation could be immunised from any potential challenge, even from women who might be victims of it, that it could be seen by the electorate as setting a dangerous precedent for the separation of powers. The government would be wise to proceed with simple repeal, as weighed up over months by the committee. If you complicate it by inserting a warning, it opens up a hornet's nest and potentially could cause a significant and completely unnecessary delay. I also want to say to those who have said that they will not vote for abortion legislation for access, regardless of the result of the referendum, and to all parties here. The debate we are entering into and the referendum is clearly not just the debate about the repeal of the 8th Amendment from the Constitution, but it is going to be about the recommendations of the Oireachtas Committee, including 12 weeks access on request. No party should stand in the way of that. Finally, I want to say that it is young people who have led the way on this. They will simply not stand anymore for a society that oppresses women, for a society that limits personal freedom. They will struggle for this human rights issue, for this civil rights issue, for this democratic rights issue of the right of a woman to control her own body. And they will struggle beyond this referendum to ensure that that exists. And they will not just leave it there. They will demand sex education in school which actually informs people about their bodies, which is LGBTQ positive, as opposed to the situation that exists at the moment, which recognises, as Alexandra Kollontai wrote, that sexuality is a human instinct as natural as thirst or hunger. That means an end to church control of our schools. They will similarly struggle for a properly funded, for a secular healthcare system, separation again of church and state. They'll struggle for decent public services, for people to have decent standards of living, decent wages, decent access to housing, all of the things that are necessary to provide people with real choice. I just want to finish with an appropriate quote from the German-Polish revolutionary socialist Rosa Luxemburg. She wrote, "When wide circles of society are seized by a sense of injustice, it is always a sure sign that far-reaching shifts have taken place in the economic basis of society, and that the existing order of things has already come into contradiction with the ongoing process of development. The present powerful movement of millions of proletarian women who feel their political disenfranchisement to be a crying injustice is just such an unmistakable sign that the social foundations of the existing state are already rotten and that its days are numbered." I think that the days of the backward, Catholic Church-dominated, women-oppressing state of 1983, which in reality is the counter-revolutionary state of 1922, that its days are numbered.